How many of you remember your first car? Just raise your hand if you remember your first car. That's something I think we never forget. And I'm betting some of you wish, if I still had that first car and tucked it in a garage somewhere and didn't do whatever I did to it as a young driver, it might be worth a heck of a lot of money right now. I remember my first cars. I say cars because I went through them pretty fast. My parents gave me a wood-paneled station wagon that lasted 1 week. My parents gave me a small Pontiac sedan. That lasted about a year and a half. That followed a Chevy Citation. It's kind of like a bubbly little weird-looking car. That lasted about a year. I had a minivan. I had a Toyota. But finally, my parents said, enough. You are a black hole that we just keep pouring cars into. It's time to get your own. And when it was time to get my own car, of course, it had to be an SUV. So here's a picture of my first car that I bought, the first car that I purchased. It's coming. I know we're building suspense. What was it? Needless to say, I was not very easy on my cars. There was a car I dreamed of. When people say, what was your dream car? And my friends would say, oh, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari. I always drew the same car, a Jeep Cherokee. That's what I wanted. From a little kid, and I believe in obtainable dreams. So it wasn't some far-fetched thing I never owned. And sure enough, my first one was a white one, and that lasted 4 years. Interestingly, at the time, they weren't built super well. And so I had little things happen like, certain things in the car would break down. And I was not really nice to my cars. Often I would pull up in parking lots and no one would really know what color the car was. It was mud. We washed the windows so I could see, but the car was mud colored. And so I owned that car for 4 years, dealt with the mechanical thises and that's, and then moved on and bought my second Jeep Cherokee, a black one, or mud-colored, depending on which day you saw it. And dealt with many of the same problems that I had in the first one. And as this one was beginning to come to its last days, I took it and exchanged it for another one. Why? Well, I had some pretty interesting thoughts. They continued to have much of the same problems, and I would argue you could choose any car brand and this would be the case, but this was mine. And I would make, at 100,000 miles, every car starts making strange noises from the engine. Well, I hardly ever roll down the passenger window anyway. Nobody uses the rear wiper. And little things would break on it and little things, and I just assumed that's what it was. But the thing is, why did I keep buying them? If my experience was not good, why did I keep buying them? 14 years I drove Jeep Cherokees, and not to I don't know anyone's affiliation with Jeep, Chrysler, or anything, and that's not my point, so please. But if my experience with them was not great, why did I stick with it? 14 years before one of my friends said, okay, listen, windows don't stop rolling down at 150,000 miles. Sometimes they keep working. And wipers don't always break. And engines don't always sound like that. He made another suggestion for a vehicle, and when I bought it, it was like, whoa, this is amazing. It actually had some of the miles one of my Jeeps stopped running at when I bought it. And it was phenomenal. But what makes you stick with something? We can go on to our next slide. Why do we do that? Why do we stick with what's familiar? Even when it's not working or when it's a bad situation. Rather than trying something new. Why would we rather return to a bad situation than head into the unknown? It's a great question for life. It's a great question in church. It's a great question posed by the Israelites in Exodus 16. And that's what I want to look into the unknown or back to Egypt. as I was thinking through today, a couple pieces came together. Something talked about in Renewal Lab, which is a project our staff did about a year and a half ago, and some things as I was reading in Exodus. So let's take a look at that. I want to look at some reasons I think we stick with what's familiar instead of charging into the unknown. And some ways maybe we can begin to poke away at that and begin to move in a direction God might call us. So the first thing I want to talk about is uncertainty is better than chains. I want you to watch this little video clip here and go back one. We'll come to that quick. I've got a little video clip, and before they play it, I'm going to qualify as this. I was looking for a video of what I'd call, hit pause quick, what I'd call an epic quit. Have you ever quit a job? Raise your hand if you've quit a job. I quit. Okay, I thought it would be great to watch some videos. I screened a few and realized about 98% of the videos of people quitting I can't show in church. So there's that. But I found one I thought could. This was kind of a creative, charming way, and it was featured on some news shows. So we're going to show you an epic quit. This is in like a Starbucks type coffee shop. That's his bosses.
Hit it. I am quitting this job today. I'm leaving the light to start a new thing. Made it to the top and it started my coffee shop. I am moving on. Got to go, got to go, got to go. Why would I sing this song? Yeah, I am quitting this job today. You know I said I'm gone, yeah.
Isn't that great? You can go on to the next slide. How many of you have ever wanted to do this? What I would call the epic quit. It's not the 2 weeks notice, it's the epic quit in grand fashion. I watched, as I screened videos, I watched a girl who edited videos break dance on top of her boss's desk at 4:30 in the morning, then leave a video of it for her boss, saying, I quit. I watched a guy whose friends came in with marching band instruments and marched through their business as he was walking out. I watched a guy in a Pizza Hut costume just trash the place. In his costume, it's the Little Caesars guy, the Little Caesars guy throwing toppings up in the air and just, have you ever just wanted to epic, crazy quit? It's kind of in there. If the situation's not good, if it's not right, you're like, okay, not only am I leaving this, but I'm making a statement. An epic quit. Well, that's what Israel did. Their job was slave to Egypt. And they epically quit. They didn't just sing. Their God unleashed 10 horrific plagues on them, from bugs to sickness to the death of their firstborn. And then on the way out, when the army came after them, God buried their army at the bottom of the Red Sea. That, my friends, is an epic quit. I quit. I'm not being your slaves anymore. And by the way, I'm not just quitting, attacking your land with pestilence and bugs, costing you your firstborn. I'm also marching out with a heck of a lot of treasures, all of the treasures of your country as well. That is an epic quit. And that's the style at which Israel leaves Egypt. Epic quit. So let's pick this up now. They have this epic quit and they head off into the wilderness. And let's see what's going on. It's been about a month and a half. And let's read from Exodus 16 what's going on. Okay. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and went to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month. Okay? After they had come out of Egypt, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out in the desert to starve this entire assembly to death." So it's been, 15th day of the second month. So a month and a half or 2 months and a half, depending on how you read that. And they're saying, "Hey, we're hungry. When we were back in Egypt, did you just bring us out to kill us? It'd have been better if we just died. We don't have anything to eat. If we could go back there, there were pots of meat." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them to see whether they will follow my instruction. On the 6th day, they're to prepare what they bring in, so that is to be twice as much as they gather the other days." And he goes on to explain, I'm going to provide bread from them. You can't take too much. You can't store a bunch. It's only what you need for a day. And on Saturday, you collect twice as much so you don't have to collect on Sunday. Simple rule. And they complain later about, well, it's just bread. And he says, okay, in the evening, I'm going to provide quail, meat. So you're going to have bread in the morning, meat in the evening. I'm going to provide for you. And God goes on to say, and this is how you'll know I'm God. What's interesting to me is the complaint itself. I wish we could go back. Well, let's see. What were they going back to? You can go to the next slide. In the slide before, you see them in the wilderness, but they're free. And they're depending on God. And they say, we wish we could go back. I remember sitting around with pots of meat. I didn't hear anyone say, I remember the giant guy on that block with the whip smashing my back with that whip while I built temples for some God I don't believe in. I didn't hear that in there. I remember when those guards took me aside and beat the heck out of me and left me in the, bloody in the sand because I didn't carry enough bricks. I didn't hear anyone say that. I remember meat. That's what I hear. Isn't it interesting? The selective memory when you look back on something. What is it that makes a spouse stay in an abusive relationship? What is it that makes a company go, you know what, we're not going to upgrade our equipment. We know this equipment. It breaks down a little bit, but we're not going to upgrade. Yeah, I know there's a new software program, but that means I got to learn new software, and this one works okay. So I know in my wife's mind right now, she's going, yeah, because this is what she does, upgrades and stuff in her company. Why is it that we don't do this? Why do we settle for okay? Or settle for not okay and choose just not to remember the parts that weren't good? It's easy to forget the past. It's easy to forget the bad and just think about the good. Because that scenario is comfortable for them. How long were they in Egypt? 400 years or something like that? That's all they knew. Walking off into a desert, look, what if we laid this out for you right now? Okay. You can be a slave in Egypt. You'll have food, but you are a slave. You have no rights. You are owned by people. You do the work they tell you. They can beat you when they want to. They can kill people if they want to. They can separate your family. They can do whatever they want to you. Or you can head off into the wilderness with your freedom, with the uncertainty as to whether God will provide or not. Well, what would you choose? It seems maybe like an easy decision. Sure, I'd take my freedom and the thing, but it's so hard sometimes to step away from the comfortable situation, even if the situation is horrendous. Sometimes the uncertain is better than chains, but it doesn't often feel that way, does it? But if I pose that question, I think every person in here would say, I'm going to take freedom, wilderness, and trust in God. Posed here, but if you translate this concept in our lives, it's much harder. What situations do we hold on to that are less than ideal or destructive or just in need of an update? Because the place we are is more comfortable than the place we're called to go. I actually heard something encouraging. You know what my dad did? 79. He started a Facebook page. My dad just started a Facebook page. That's pretty amazing. He's kind of going through this thing in his life, this like renaissance, and he realizes there's a lot going on with my kids scattered around and I can't track it. So I want Facebook so I can see these pictures. You know, more likely it's so he can argue politics with me, but that's a whole other thing. But he's got Facebook. That's crazy. And it's cool. And it's something new. And he had to get over that, well, I don't know how to do this. I don't think I have all this time for, he can talk himself into doing nothing, or maybe he can do something. And on the other side, he's like, this is really great. Now he sees pictures of me, squirting bubbles from a bubble gun blowing on my little baby's head, and he can see those pictures instantly. And his comment now is, what did I wait for? Sometimes uncertainty is better than chains. Let's look at our second one here. If you want to move on from chains to uncertainty with some confidence, here's the path to do it. And this is what I would have said to Israel out in the desert. You've got some things that you need to do. And the first one is you need to start remembering what God has done a month and a half or 2 months and a half into this wilderness journey. It's time for a rehash, a recap. So this is a picture from indoor rock climbing at junior high youth group. We did this a little earlier this spring. Indoor rock climbing is a blast. If you've never seen it, they've got a wall. It's about 40 feet high. And you put a kid in a harness, you clip them in, and then you go. And for kids who have never done this before, there are a couple key moments. The first key moment is when they start. This picture actually shows all three. So the first key moment is when they start climbing. They look at this wall and they go, I don't even know how to do this. But they grab onto a hold, they put a foot, and then I said, now just stand up on the thing. And they start going, like the girl in the middle. She's just getting started on this. And you think, I've never done this before, this is crazy. But it's a straight wall with little things sticking out. Can I even do this? But you learn you can do this. The second thing is the kid on the left. And it's once you get to what I'd call a moderately terrifying height and you look down, then you realize, holy, I'm on like right here and I'm pretty high up. What if I fall? And that's when they realize this rope is there, but they've never tested the rope. That's a scary moment. And that moment is amplified when they get to the top, there's a chain up, they have to touch the chain. So they slap the chain and then we say, now let go. What? No, let go, really, this is what you do. You let go of the wall. And you sit back in your harness and that rope carries you down. And I can't tell you how many kids are just like, I can't. Oh, yes, you can. No, I can't let go. Well, every other child in here did, so I know you can. I can't. No, but listen, you're going to. And you start threatening. No, I will leave you up there. No. You try it and go, okay, listen. I know that you want to hold on to something, so just hold on to the rope. And they get one hand and they get on, and then they realize they're not holding their weight on the wall anymore. It's all the rope. And then we slowly lower them down, and they experience for the first time trust in the rope. After they've had that experience, they're jumping in line to climb the wall again. They scurry right up the wall. They get up there and say, okay, let go, and they just let go, and now they're not holding onto the rope. They're like kicking off the wall and swinging. They're spinning themselves in circles. They're being all crazy because now they know the rope works. They've experienced trust in the rope, and now they know it works. So now rock climbing is not scary to them anymore. I love watching this progression. If you want confidence heading into unknown, first you need to remember what God has done. I don't mean to talk down Israel's issue. When you're in the desert, imagine if I took you and your immediate family and I put you in the middle of the wilderness. And your first realization is, I have no way to feed my family. That's a pretty urgent concern to you, isn't it? I'm certainly not going to talk that down. Now multiply that by thousands of families. It's a big deal. What are we going to eat? There's no food here. But what have they seen so far? And this is where I would challenge them. It's time to take a walk back to see what God has done for you. Okay, let's go to the next slide. You were slaves in a nation. You were slaves for 400 years crying out for God to help you. And God sent a messenger who turned water into blood. Out of that, created frogs that came out and infested the entire nation that slaved you. The assistant of that prophet hits his staff on the ground. The dust that comes off becomes lice and infects the nation that oppressed you. He sends disease on their livestock and kills all of their livestock and horses. He created boils, big blisters on all of the Egyptians. He made hail come down. He brought locusts on them. Is there some point you're going, okay, okay, God, you got this. I'm just going to watch. Israel didn't do any of this. This isn't man-made. This is God flexing. You want to mess with God? You're not going to let my people go? Let me show you what I can do. And Israel just goes, okay, God's got this. And the plagues continued. Darkness, for 3 days it was the darkness that is said so thick you could feel it. And finally, God's Spirit passing over and taking the life of every firstborn in Egypt. So they tell him, go, get out. Take all the treasure, take whatever, just get out of here, get out. And then they change their mind. And they go after him. And God parts an ocean for them. And when they're done, God closes that ocean up and swallows up that nation's entire army. Can God do stuff? God can do stuff. That's their history. Where was the person in this going, you know what? What are you guys worrying about? Worry when there's an army bearing down on us going to slaughter you, and then still look what God did. Destroyed the army. Now you've just got a grumble in your stomach? And you're ready to go back to slavery? It's time to remember what God has done. In the Old Testament, there was a tradition, and you'll see this time and time again. When God showed up and did something, they would build an altar. They would pile up rocks, and they would name the place. God saves. God provides. It's the Hebrew words for these things. God is faithful. And generations could go by and see these things, and it's a reminder of what God did. And I don't know who in the crowd was saying, can we just go down the checklist of what God's done so far before we start complaining and wanting to go back to Egypt? Because I bet he probably can make, if he's the God of frogs, lice, flies, and locusts, maybe he can give us something to eat. If he's the God of, water to blood, pestilence, and, darkness and firstborn taking away, maybe he can provide us something to drink. What has God done? And this goes for you too. When you face uncertainty, when a church faces uncertainty, even in your personal life, it's time to go, what have you seen God do? This is a fun one to think through. What have we seen God do? I was reflecting over a few of the years. You can go on to the next one. Where are places we stepped out in faith and saw fruit from it? One of the very first ones that jumps to mind is the year we said, we're watching our conventional vacation Bible school decline and decline and decline, and we're down to about 26 kids last year. What else could we do? And the idea of sports camp came up, and it evolved. And people began to get excited about it, something new. We've never done it. What's it going to look like? I don't know. Let's figure it out. How many kids are going to come? I have no idea. Where are we going to do it? I don't know. We'll find a place. And all of those, it sounds, when you talk about it like this, it sounds like poor planning. But it does come together. And the first year of it, many of you were involved. We had 56 kids on the first night. A ton of new families checked it out. We got a lot of great contacts. We're gearing up to do it again this year. It was a great step into the unknown. And now we need to make that rock pile. Sports camp. There are more. Halloween hub. When we turn the house on, turn the church into a place where families could come. And ironically, God kind of forced it on us. We were doing trunk or treat, but it kept raining, so we had to move things inside. And families were coming in because they're like, whoa, a place we can dry off. This is good. So God almost handed that one to us. It was just natural to say, well, what else could we add to it? God's already kind of pushing us this way. What else can we do? And it's a vibrant thing. We often have 60 to 100 people come in and out of here on Halloween, getting the pictures taken, familiar with the church, going downstairs, getting candy. Make that pile. Halloween hub. When I look at our household goods, there was a count recently, 90 people coming in here on Friday afternoons to eat pizza together and collect household goods, shampoo, toilet paper, paper towels, things like that. I came and saw some of those, talked at some of those. It's like almost a whole congregation of people on a Friday that God brings here for us to minister to. I imagine at some point someone said, well, there's this idea, what if we don't do a food pantry, let's just do the household goods. And at some point it probably sounded crazy, or I don't know what this is going to look like, where's the stuff going to come from? But you know what? It's working, isn't it? And it's bringing people in. Let's make that rock pile. Household goods. We can go on. There's a lot of places that we've seen God work in this church, is there? That's what we need to think about. As we're heading into a time for a pastor search, that's an uncertainty. And it can be a little unnerving, it can be scary, but you know what? This isn't a wilderness by ourselves. This is a place where God has shown his faithfulness in the past. You know, he's parted a sea for us. He's provided what we needed to move forward. So why would we not believe he's going to continue to do that? It's an exciting time, if anything. You got to remember what God has done. Last thing. Imagine what God can do. Here's a little fun question to ask. What if they had gone back? What if they said, yep, you're right, let's go back to Egypt? After you just decimated this society, after you took their firstborn, you took all their treasure, their livestock and animals are gone, this society is devastated and would take generations to recover. What do you think happens when they go back? Hey, that's cool, you guys can have your spot back, here's your pots of meat. You think that's what Egypt's going to do? They're dead. You go back, you're dead. That's what's going to happen. It's not even a reasonable thing that they're requesting. Can we just go back? We could go back. You know what? That's not even reasonable. And here's the fact. Every great thing has an expiration date. Every great idea has an expiration date. Being a slave in Egypt had an expiration date, and God punched that date and closed that door. You see, if you're going to follow God, you can't go backwards. You have to move forwards. There is a common thread through Scripture of God's tension when he tries to move his people forward and they resist. And it usually doesn't work out well for God's people. But it's a common thread. So instead of trying to hold on to what used to be, maybe it's time to live in that exciting place of what could God do? I would love to ask the question of the Israelites in the desert, what do you think? What do you believe God can do? So your stomach's hungry and you have no water? What do you believe God is capable of? If you just saw him part an ocean, don't you think he can give you bread? Feed you? If you just saw him smash an army with waves, don't you think he can give you water? And maybe that same question I would ask you this morning. What do you believe God can do? What is your God capable of? There's a scripture that speaks to that, by the way. The answer is, according to Ephesians 3, abundantly more than you can imagine. Abundantly more than you can even imagine. That's the correct answer. Think of everything the Israelites would have missed had they turned around or even just settled. Well, we can't go back, but I don't know where we're going, so let's just settle. Let's just stop. Well, let's go through some things that they would have missed. They would have missed Moses bringing water out of a rock. They would have missed defeating an army because Moses was on a mountain holding his staff up. And when his staff lowered, they were losing, and when he raised it, they won. And that taught them the dependence on God. At Mount Sinai, they would have missed God's presence settling on the top of a mountain and hearing literally the voice of God obscured by thunder and clouds as he produced the 10 Commandments for them. They'd have missed it. They would have missed God parting the Jordan River for them to go into the Promised Land. They would have missed the defeating of countless armies, way bigger than them, more numerous, and God knocks them down one after another. They would have missed the marching exercise around the walls of Jericho for a week and watched God, with the sound of trumpets, tear down a giant fortress city. That's a lot they would miss if they just said, you know what? We just want to stay where we are. Don't ruffle our feathers. It's uncertain out there. If that's where they settle, then I say they believe God's ability is very small. There's an exciting place where you are moving beyond what you can see, following God. It's a place where you see him move very powerfully. When the things you're trying are beyond your ability, and they will fail if he doesn't show up. When God says, take 300 people and go attack that army of 10,000, it's going to fail unless he shows up, and he does. I want you to march your nation into this heavy flowing river. If God doesn't show up, people are going to drown. But he shows up. That's not just the God of the Old Testament. If you believe God is God, you believe he has that ability to intervene and make things happen even today. What will you be missing if you stay with what's familiar and don't push into the unknown? It's an exciting place to live. It's a little unnerving because you're that kid that God's saying, okay, let go of the wall. I've got this. And you're having to take your hand and hold on to that rope. And you have to fully trust God. And it's a scary place. Leave it on the blank slide. One more. There you go. I want to share a story with you as I wrap up. I had a conversation with a guy who I've known for a very long time. And it was a few weeks ago. And he, in casual conversation, said, oh, I have to tell you, I went to church last week. And I was dead silent. In most of my adult years, I have never known this person to go to church. Doesn't go to church. I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, I heard a little bit about this church. They met in a college. It's a college you went to when you were younger. They meet in an auditorium. I thought I'd give it a check. I'd check it out. He said, I walked in. They had music. It was really energetic music. They actually offered the option to take earplugs at the door. I thought that was interesting. He said, I went in. The music was great. People were worshiping. It was exciting. He said, the speaker got up there, and there was a treadmill. And he was walking on the treadmill, and someone got on the treadmill next to him, and they were talking while they were on the treadmill. And he said, and I was listening to the conversation, and I didn't realize till about 6 minutes in, this was the sermon happening on a treadmill between two people. It was a conversational sermon. He said, I've never seen that before. He said, I left this thing, and I was really excited. He said, I can't wait to go back there. I'm going next Sunday. I'm shocked. Absolutely shocked. I'm shocked for two reasons. You go to the next slide. The first is, this is the pastor. His name is Travis Whitaker. Travis Whitaker was a student in the community where I was a youth pastor 22, 23 years ago. Popped in and out of my youth group. He helped start a Bible study at the school there. Youth group kids have heard that story. He was a kid who I had a chance to minister to a little bit. That's actually a giant heart. They're talking about where our heart's at, and they have a giant heart. Okay? That was amazing to me, but not as nearly as amazing as the second fact. Go to the next slide. The guy I was talking to is my dad. 79 years old. I can never remember my dad going to church. When I was 5, the pastor at the church they went to embezzled money. The church fired him, and my dad never went back to church. He only came in when I preached at a church here or there, but he never found a church that just felt right to him. My dad goes to church. I haven't been able to say that for most of my life. My dad goes to church. He stepped into the unknown, and he encountered Christ there. And now there are conversations I'm having with my 79-year-old dad that I have never had with him before. And he's asking questions of me that he's never asked before. The unknown is not a bad place to be. It's the place where we trust God, and he meets us there. Let's pray. Father God, our comfort zone is a place that we like to hang out and stay. And being comfortable is not a bad thing, but when we let it keep us from following you and depending on you, it becomes a problem. God, I pray that you stir us and call us, convict us. When we have situations in our life or in our church where things are not working well and it's time for change, you would help us to embrace that. When you call us to places that are unknown, that we would honor that, not afraid of the unknown, but excited to see how you will meet us there. Uncertainty is better than change. We need to remember where we've seen you, and we need to remember what you can yet do in our lives. We pray this in your name. Will you join us for our closing worship?